I'm Amber Wilson, 28, a marketing specialist from Boston who married into the wealthy Thompson restaurant empire. Tonight, at my in-laws' anniversary celebration, I'm sitting in the most expensive restaurant I've ever seen, watching my sister-in-law Madison smirk as the waiter presents a bill for $180,000. "Oh, sis-in-law, we forgot our purse and cards," she announces sweetly, while I sit there with maxed-out credit cards and $17 in my checking account. What happens next leaves me stunned when my normally proper in-laws burst into unexpected laughter. Before I tell you how I ended up in this mess, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe for more family drama stories that might make yours seem normal in comparison. Growing up in rural Massachusetts, my life was comfortable but modest. My father worked as a high school teacher, and my mother ran a small bakery in our town. We never went hungry, but designer clothes and luxury vacations weren't part of my vocabulary. I worked part-time jobs through high school and earned a scholarship to Boston University, where I studied marketing and communications. That's where I met Ryan Thompson during my junior year. Tall, kind-eyed, and genuinely funny, Ryan was different from the other business students. While they flaunted their wealth with expensive watches and constant talk about their parents' connections, Ryan drove a sensible car and actually seemed interested in learning. We bonded over a group project, and soon we were studying together regularly. It took me 3 months to discover his family-owned Thompson Restaurant Group, one of the largest upscale dining chains in New England. "It's just restaurants," he'd said with a shrug when he finally told me. "Nothing special." I later learned just restaurants meant 37 high-end establishments across 6 states, a family compound in Martha's Vineyard, and a private jet they used only for emergencies or really good golf tournaments, as Ryan's father would later joke. Meeting the Thompson family was intimidating. Richard Thompson, Ryan's father, had built his empire from a single diner he'd purchased at age 22. Now in his 60s, he maintained the straightforward manner of someone who knew the value of hard work, but his custom suits and the ease with which he ordered $1,000 bottles of wine betrayed his current status. Elizabeth Thompson, Ryan's mother, came from old Boston money. She had the polished grace of someone raised in privilege, but unlike many wealthy women I'd encountered, she seemed genuinely interested in people regardless of their bank accounts. She asked thoughtful questions about my studies and my family's bakery, never making me feel lesser for my background. Then there was Madison, Ryan's younger sister by 2 years. While Ryan had inherited his father's unpretentious nature, Madison was her mother's daughter in appearance only. She had Elizabeth's elegance without her warmth, her refined taste without her kindness. From our first meeting, Madison assessed me with cool blue eyes that took in my department store dress and non-designer purse, categorizing me immediately as unworthy of her brother. "Marketing? How interesting," she'd said during our first dinner together, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "I suppose every business needs someone to run their social media." Madison had graduated from Wharton and worked nominally for the family business, though her role seemed to primarily involve attending charity galas and posting photos from exotic locations on Instagram. She had married Derek Holloway 3 years earlier, a man whose family fortune in real estate development matched the Thompsons' restaurant wealth. Derek and Madison were the perfect power couple, beautiful, rich, and completely dismissive of anyone they deemed beneath them. My first Christmas with the Thompsons had been eye-opening. The gifts exchanged were extravagant: designer bags, luxury watches, and weekend getaways presented with casual ease. I had spent weeks making homemade candles and baking specialty cookies for everyone, only to watch Madison unwrap mine with a tight smile. "How crafty," she'd said, setting aside my gift to admire the Cartier bracelet Derek had given her. Despite these tensions, Ryan and I built our relationship on genuine connection. He proposed after 2 years of dating, with a ring that I later learned had belonged to his grandmother, a detail that made Madison purse her lips in disapproval when she saw it. You could have at least had it reset in platinum, I overheard her telling Ryan at our engagement party. Our wedding was a compromise between my desire for simplicity and the Thompsons' social obligations. While not the society event Madison had orchestrated for her own wedding, covered in Vogue and featuring a performance by a Grammy-winning artist, our celebration was still far more lavish than anything my family had experienced. After the wedding, Ryan and I settled into a comfortable brownstone in Boston's South End. While it was a beautiful home in an expensive neighborhood, we had chosen it as a sensible investment rather than purchasing the luxury penthouse Richard had suggested. Ryan worked as an executive in the family business, but insisted on earning his position rather than simply inheriting it. I had taken a job at a boutique marketing firm, wanting to establish my own career rather than working for the Thompson empire. This independence frequently put us at odds with family expectations. Madison and Derek lived in a sprawling apartment overlooking Boston Harbor, drove matching luxury SUVs, and seemed to approach life as if money were an unlimited resource. Family gatherings often became subtle competitions, with Madison frequently commenting on our cute little place or asking when Ryan would finally take on real responsibility in the company. Through it all, Ryan remained my steadfast ally, though sometimes he was oblivious to his sister's digs or his parents' assumptions about our finances. Having grown up with wealth, he didn't always recognize the pressures I felt to maintain appearances within his family. When Richard and Elizabeth announced they would be celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary, I knew immediately it would be an elaborate affair. What I didn't anticipate was how this celebration would bring all the unspoken tensions in our family dynamic to a head. 6 months before their actual anniversary date, Richard and Elizabeth called a family dinner to discuss celebration plans. Ryan and I joined Madison and Derek at his parents' Beacon Hill townhouse, where their longtime housekeeper served us a casual dinner that included lobster bisque and filet mignon. 40 years deserves something special, Richard announced, pouring everyone vintage Bordeaux that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. We've been thinking about Lucille. Lucille was not just a restaurant, it was an institution. Located on the top floor of Boston's tallest building, it had 3 Michelin stars and a waiting list rumored to be months long unless you were someone of importance, which the Thompsons certainly were. The restaurant was famous for its gold leaf accented desserts, rare ingredient imports, and wine cellar valued at over $10 million. Perfect choice, Madison chimed in immediately. I know the executive chef from the charity gala last year. I'll handle the arrangements. We want to keep it intimate, Elizabeth said. Just family and our closest friends. Perhaps 40 people for 40 years. Madison was already scrolling through her phone contacts. I'll start a planning committee. Amber, you can help with invitations or something. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table. Amber's the marketing expert. She could handle all the communication and coordination. Madison's smile tightened. Of course, but I've already worked with most of these vendors for my events. It makes more sense for me to take the lead. We'll all contribute, Richard declared. And of course, we'll split the celebration costs equally among the children. Your mother and I just want to enjoy ourselves without worrying about details. My stomach dropped. Splitting costs equally sounded fair in theory, but when the other contributors were Madison and Derek, whose combined income was at least 5 times what Ryan and I made, equal didn't feel equitable. Later that night, as Ryan and I got ready for bed, I broached the subject carefully. Your dad's anniversary dinner, what do you think the per-couple contribution might be? Ryan shrugged as he hung up his suit. Probably a few thousand each. Why? A few thousand is a lot for us right now, I reminded him. We just put that money into fixing the bathroom leak, and our mortgage payment just went up with the interest rate adjustment. Ryan sat beside me on the bed. I know things are tight with the promotion still pending and your company's slow quarter. But this is important to my parents. I understand that. I just wish the contributions could be proportional rather than equal. Madison and Derek spend a few thousand on a weekend trip without blinking. If it's really a problem, I can talk to Dad, Ryan offered, though I could tell by his tone he was reluctant. No, I sighed. That would just give Madison more ammunition. We'll figure it out. The next day, I researched Lucille online, hoping to get some sense of the potential costs. The restaurant didn't list prices publicly, never a good sign for budget-conscious diners, but reviews mentioned tasting menus starting at $400 per person before drinks, tax, or gratuity. For 40 guests, we were looking at a minimum of $16,000 just for food, likely doubling with fine wines and service. My portion of this equal contribution would likely exceed our monthly mortgage payment. I started cutting back immediately, bringing lunch to work, canceling my rarely used gym membership, and picking up freelance marketing projects on weekends. Ryan contributed by reducing his golf outings and business lunches, though he seemed less concerned about the potential expense than I was. Madison, meanwhile, turned the anniversary planning into a full-time occupation. She created a dedicated email address and sent daily updates about potential menu options, decor choices, and seating arrangements. She also organized a series of pre-celebration events, shopping excursions, spa days, and brunches that were supposedly optional but presented as mandatory family bonding. 3 weeks before the dinner, I finally gathered the courage to speak directly with Madison about my concerns. I called her on a Tuesday afternoon, catching her between her morning Pilates class and lunch with friends. Madison, I wanted to talk about the anniversary budget. I began carefully. What about it? Her tone was already dismissive. Ryan and I are on a tighter budget than you might realize. We're worried about being able to contribute equally for such an extravagant celebration. The silence on the line lasted just long enough to be uncomfortable. Amber, this is my parents' 40th anniversary. If you and Ryan can't afford to participate properly, perhaps you should reconsider your priorities. Everyone else is managing just fine. I'm not saying we won't contribute, I clarified. I'm just wondering if there's a way to adjust expectations or costs. The plans are already set, Madison replied coldly. If you're having financial difficulties, that's really between you and Ryan. Don't try to diminish my parents' celebration because you married my brother without considering what being part of this family entails. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me with a mixture of anger and humiliation. Later that evening, she sent a group email detailing the final menu selection, which now included an additional champagne toast with rare vintage Dom Perignon. The day before the anniversary dinner, Madison organized what she called a ladies' preparation day for Elizabeth, herself, me, and the wives of Richard's 2 brothers. The itinerary she emailed included appointments at an exclusive salon, lunch at an upscale bistro, and shopping at Newberry Street's most expensive boutiques. I arrived at the salon 15 minutes early, hoping to speak with Elizabeth privately before the others joined. The receptionist led me to a waiting area with cucumber water and imported Italian cookies, informing me that Mrs. Thompson had called to say everyone would be running 20 minutes late. When the group finally arrived, Madison was leading the way in designer activewear that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Sorry we're late, she announced without sounding sorry at all. Mom and I were finalizing some surprise details for tomorrow. Elizabeth hugged me warmly. Amber, darling, you look tired. Is everything all right? Before I could answer, Madison interrupted. She's fine, Mom. Everyone's getting the works today. Hair, nails, facial, makeup trial for tomorrow. My treat. While this generous gesture might have seemed kind to outsiders, I recognized it for what it was, Madison's way of ensuring we all looked appropriate for the celebration according to her standards. Still, I thanked her politely, knowing Elizabeth was watching our interaction closely. The salon experience was admittedly luxurious. As the stylist worked on my hair, Madison circulated among us, showing photos of the restaurant's private dining room on her phone. We've arranged for a custom menu with wine pairings for each course, she informed everyone. And wait until you see the flowers being imported from Holland. The whole room will be transformed. After our salon appointments, we headed to Maison Blanc, a French bistro where a simple salad cost $30. As we were seated at the best table, Madison ordered champagne for everyone without consulting the price. When lunch concluded and the server brought the check, Madison made a show of searching through her designer handbag. "Oh no!" she exclaimed with exaggerated dismay. "I seem to have forgotten my wallet in the rush this morning. Amber, would you mind covering me? I'll pay you back tomorrow." The bill for lunch was over $400. I smiled tightly and handed over my credit card, knowing this would mean canceling the grocery delivery I'd scheduled for that evening. "You're such a lifesaver," Madison said sweetly as the server walked away with my card. Oh, and I went ahead and made a dinner reservation for tonight too. The men are all golfing, so I thought we ladies could continue our day together. Elizabeth must have noticed my expression because she quickly intervened. "Actually, I'm feeling a bit tired. Perhaps we should save our energy for tomorrow's celebration." Madison looked disappointed but acquiesced to her mother's wishes. "Fine, but we still need to shop for something for Amber to wear. That dress you wore to the Christmas party won't work for Lucille." We proceeded to a boutique where the sales associates knew Madison by name. As they brought out dress after dress for me to try, Madison rejected each one I actually liked. Too casual. Too bright. Too last season. Finally, she held up a black dress with a modest neckline but a nearly $1,000 price tag. "This one. It's perfect and understated." I checked the price tag and faltered. "It's beautiful, but I don't think." "You need something appropriate for the venue," Madison insisted. "Consider it an investment piece." Elizabeth, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "Madison, dear, perhaps Amber already has something suitable. Not everyone needs a new outfit for every occasion." Madison's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, we're celebrating your anniversary at the most exclusive restaurant in Boston. I'm just trying to make sure everyone looks the part." I ended up purchasing a dress from the sale rack, still more expensive than I would normally spend, but at least not completely budget-destroying. Madison made her disapproval clear with a dismissive glance and murmured comment to the sales associate about bargain hunters. As we left the boutique, I checked my phone to find several messages from Ryan. The men's golf outing had apparently turned into an extended event, and they were now having drinks at the club. Ryan wouldn't be home until late. Walking toward the parking garage, I overheard Madison speaking to Elizabeth a few steps ahead of me. "I just don't understand why Ryan doesn't help her more financially," Madison was saying. "It's embarrassing watching her count pennies for a simple lunch." "Madison," Elizabeth replied in a low voice, "not everyone measures success by their bank account. Ryan and Amber have different priorities." "But they're family," Madison insisted. "She should at least try to fit in better." "That sale rack dress is going to look so out of place tomorrow." Elizabeth sighed, but didn't contradict her daughter. Her silence felt like tacit agreement, and my cheeks burned with humiliation as I pretended not to have heard them. By the time I arrived home that evening, I was emotionally exhausted and increasingly anxious about the next day's celebration. Ryan came home shortly before midnight, slightly tipsy from the day with the guys and completely oblivious to my stress. "Did you have fun with the ladies?" he asked, climbing into bed beside me. "Madison orchestrated the entire day to remind me I don't belong in your family," I replied, too tired to soften the truth. Ryan sighed. "Amber, you're exaggerating. Madison is just Madison. She means well. She made me pay for everyone's lunch because she forgot her wallet, then spent the afternoon trying to pressure me into buying a $1,000 dress." "I'm sorry," Ryan said, pulling me close. "Tomorrow will be better. It's just one dinner and then it's over." If only I had known how wrong he was. The evening of the anniversary celebration arrived with perfect early autumn weather. Ryan and I took an Uber to Lucille, as parking in that area of Boston would have cost at least $60, another expense I was determined to avoid. The restaurant occupied the entire top floor of the gleaming glass tower, with windows offering panoramic views of Boston Harbor and the city's skyline. As we stepped out of the elevator, a host in an impeccable suit greeted us. "Welcome to Lucille. Are you at the Thompson celebration?" Ryan confirmed we were, and we were led through the main dining room, already filled with Boston's elite enjoying multi-course meals, toward a private space at the back. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with white orchids and gold-rimmed china. Even the air seemed rarefied, scented with subtle notes of truffle and saffron from the open kitchen. The private dining room had been transformed exactly as Madison had described. Thousands of white roses and lilies created the impression of dining in a cloud, echoing the restaurant's sky theme. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the sunset over Boston, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. Most of the guests had already arrived. Richard and Elizabeth stood near the center of the room, he in a classic tuxedo, and she in an elegant blue gown that complemented her silver hair. They greeted us warmly, with Elizabeth holding onto my hand a moment longer than necessary. "You look lovely, dear," she said, nodding approvingly at my compromised dress. "Thank you both for being here to celebrate with us." Madison and Derek arrived moments after us, making an entrance that turned heads throughout the room. Madison wore a designer gown that probably cost more than my car, accessorized with diamonds that caught the light with every movement. Derek, handsome in a way that seemed almost manufactured, surveyed the room with the confident air of someone who had never worried about a bill in his life. The seating arrangement, which Madison had undoubtedly orchestrated, placed Ryan and me directly across from her and Derek, with Richard and Elizabeth at the heads of the table. The other guests included Richard's brothers and their wives, several longtime friends of the family, and two couples who were major investors in the restaurant group. Once everyone was seated, waitstaff appeared with trays of champagne. Not just any champagne, as the sommelier explained in reverent tones, this was a rare vintage specifically selected for the occasion. Each bottle, I later learned, cost over $5,000. "A toast," Richard announced, rising to his feet with glass in hand. "To 40 years with the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Elizabeth, you've made every day an adventure worth living." Elizabeth's eyes shimmered with emotion as she raised her glass in response. "And to the family we've built together, our greatest achievement." As everyone sipped the exquisite champagne, servers began presenting the first course, a delicate arrangement of Ostra caviar with gold leaf and creme fraiche. The sommelier appeared again, this time with bottles of crisp white wine to complement the caviar. "We'll be enjoying a different wine with each course," Madison explained loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The sommelier has selected some exceptional vintages from Lucille's private cellar." I watched as Derek casually swirled his wine before taking a sip. "Excellent choice. This is the same producer we discovered in Burgundy last summer, isn't it?" The sommelier nodded appreciatively at Derek's knowledge, while I struggled to remember if I was supposed to use the small fork or the even smaller spoon for the caviar. Ryan, sensing my discomfort, subtly demonstrated by using his own utensils first. Madison leaned across the table. "Amber, you've hardly touched your caviar. Not to your taste." The question was designed to highlight my inexperience with such luxury, but I smiled pleasantly. "Just savoring it slowly. It's not every day we enjoy such a special treat." "Oh, of course," Madison replied with false sympathy. "I forget not everyone is used to fine dining." Elizabeth, overhearing this exchange, skillfully redirected the conversation. "Madison, tell everyone about the anniversary trip you and Derek took to Bali last year." As the meal progressed through course after exquisite course, the wine continued flowing freely. Each dish was more elaborate than the last. Butter-poached lobster with black truffle, A5 Wagyu beef with foie gras, rare mushrooms harvested from some remote Japanese forest. With each new wine pairing, I became increasingly aware of the mounting cost of this single meal. When I tried to discreetly order just water instead of wine for one course, Madison immediately drew attention to it. Not drinking the Bordeaux? It's over $2,000 a bottle. Dad had it imported specifically for tonight. I'm just taking a break, I explained, conscious of eyes turning toward me. Everything is so delicious. I want to remember every bite. Madison smiled thinly. How sensible of you. Meanwhile, Richard continued regaling the table with stories from his and Elizabeth's early days building the restaurant business. These tales, which I normally enjoyed for their glimpses into the hardworking people my in-laws had once been, now seemed to highlight the vast gulf between their world and mine. As the main course dishes were cleared, Madison excused herself from the table. She returned moments later with a small wrapped package, which she presented to her parents with a flourish. A small token to celebrate 40 amazing years, she announced. Elizabeth carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a pair of first-class tickets for a month-long world cruise, along with a photo album documenting preparations for a surprise vow renewal ceremony to be held on board. We've arranged everything, Madison explained as her parents expressed their delight. All your friends will be flying out to join you for the ceremony in Santorini. The extravagance of this small token made my stomach clench. Ryan and I had purchased a custom-made album filled with restored photos from throughout Richard and Elizabeth's marriage, thoughtful but now seemingly inadequate beside Madison's grand gesture. When it was our turn to present our gift, Ryan spoke warmly about the thought that had gone into finding and restoring the old photographs. Elizabeth genuinely teared up looking through the album, but I couldn't help noticing Madison's smug expression as she leaned toward Derek. So creative when you're on a budget, she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. For hours into the anniversary celebration, we had progressed through 7 courses, each with its own wine pairing. The conversation had grown louder as the evening advanced, with Richard telling increasingly animated stories about the early days of his restaurant empire, and several guests abandoning their seats to mingle around the room. I excused myself to visit the restroom, needing a moment away from the opulence and Madison's pointed comments. The ladies' room at Lucille was, unsurprisingly, a sanctuary of marble and soft lighting, with a uniformed attendant offering hand towels and various toiletries. As I was washing my hands, Madison entered, her timing so perfect I suspected she had followed me deliberately. Having a good time, she asked, reapplying her lipstick in the mirror. It's a beautiful celebration, I replied diplomatically. Your parents seem very happy. Madison turned to face me directly. I wanted to discuss something with you privately. Derek and I think it would be special if we, the children, covered the entire bill tonight as our gift to Mom and Dad. My heart nearly stopped. The entire bill? For 40 people. It's the least we can do, Madison continued smoothly. They've given us so much. We thought we'd split it evenly between our 2 couples. Madison, I don't think you understand our financial situation, I began carefully. We're still paying off student loans, and it's one night, Amber, she interrupted. One special night for my parents. Surely you can manage to contribute to that without bringing up your limitations. She checked her reflection one final time. I've already discussed it with the others, and everyone agrees it's the perfect surprise. Before I could protest further, she swept out of the restroom, leaving me gripping the marble countertop for support. In a panic, I pulled out my phone to text Ryan. Emergency. Madison plans for us to split the entire bill. We can't afford this. His reply came a minute later. What? That wasn't the plan. How much? No idea, but must be thousands per couple. Multiple courses, rare wines for 40 people. What do we do? Don't worry. We'll talk to her. But when I returned to the table, Ryan was deep in conversation with one of his father's business associates, and Madison was nowhere to be seen. I spent the next course in anxious distraction, barely tasting the delicate chocolate and gold leaf dessert placed before me. As coffee and digestives were being served, Madison clinked her glass to gain everyone's attention. Before this wonderful evening concludes, the children have a special surprise, she announced, smiling broadly at her parents. As a token of our appreciation for everything you've done for us, we want to cover tonight's celebration. Richard began to protest, but Madison continued, "We insist. It's decided. It's the least we can do to thank you both for 40 years of love and guidance." Elizabeth looked touched, while Richard seemed both surprised and proud. I felt Ryan tense beside me as he realized what was happening, but before he could say anything, the maitre d' appeared at Madison's side with a leather folder. "The account for this evening, madam, as requested," he murmured discreetly. Madison accepted the folder with a gracious nod, opening it briefly before passing it to Derek. I watched as his eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of the astronomical sum listed inside. The folder made its way around the table to Ryan, who opened it and immediately paled. When he showed me the total, I nearly gasped aloud. $180,000. The figure seemed impossible, more than twice our annual mortgage payments, more than I had made in my first 2 years of work combined. Even divided between couples, our share would be $90,000, an amount we simply didn't have. As the folder continued its journey around the table, generating murmurs of appreciation for the children's generosity, Madison approached our side of the table. "Isn't this wonderful?" she said loudly. "Now, shall we settle up between couples before presenting the gift to Mom and Dad?" Ryan stood up, clearly intending to take Madison aside for a private conversation, but she was already extracting her black American Express card from her purse. Derek followed suit, both of them looking expectantly at us. That's when Madison delivered the line that would change the evening entirely. "Oh, sis-in-law," she exclaimed with exaggerated dismay, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "We forgot our purse and cards." Derek immediately played along. "That's right. Left everything at home. Such a shame on tonight of all nights." The restaurant manager hovered nearby, the atmosphere suddenly tense. Several guests turned to watch the drama unfold, while Ryan's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Madison," he began in a low voice, "this isn't the time." "Is there a problem?" Richard called from the head of the table, his jovial mood shifting as he sensed the tension. I looked from Madison's triumphant expression to the manager's uncomfortable hovering to the obscene total on the bill. In that moment, something in me broke. The months of anxiety, the years of trying to fit in, the constant judgment, it all came crashing down. "Yes," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "There is a problem. Madison has arranged for Ryan and me to pay half of tonight's $180,000 bill, knowing we can't possibly afford it." A hush fell over the room. Elizabeth's hand flew to her mouth, while Richard's expression darkened. "It was meant to be a surprise gift from all of us children," Madison explained quickly, her voice sugary sweet. "We had no idea Amber and Ryan were having financial difficulties." "We're not having financial difficulties," Ryan said firmly. "We're living within our means and making responsible choices. What we can't do is spontaneously spend $90,000 on dinner." The silence that followed seemed endless. I felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. This was exactly the scenario Madison had engineered, public humiliation that would forever cast us as the poor relations who couldn't keep up. And then, something unexpected happened. Richard Thompson, patriarch of the Thompson restaurant empire, began to laugh. It started as a chuckle and grew into full, deep laughter that filled the private dining room. Elizabeth joined him moments later, her elegant composure breaking into genuine mirth. Madison's perfectly composed expression faltered. "Dad? Mom? What's so funny?" Richard Thompson's laughter gradually subsided as he wiped tears from his eyes. The entire room had fallen silent, all eyes fixed on him as he rose from his seat at the head of the table. "Madison, my dear," he said, his voice warm but firm, "did you really think I would allow my children to pay for the celebration?" Madison's confident smile wavered. "It was meant to be our gift to you and Mom." "A gift you apparently hadn't discussed with your brother and sister-in-law," Elizabeth added, her expression now serious despite her earlier laughter. Richard addressed the room at large. "I must apologize for this unexpected drama. The bill for tonight's celebration was arranged and settled weeks ago. There was never any intention for our children to cover it." A wave of relief washed over me so powerfully that I had to grip the table to steady myself. Ryan placed his hand over mine, squeezing gently. Madison's face had lost its perfect composure, a flush creeping up her neck. "But we wanted to surprise you." "The only surprise," Elizabeth said quietly, "is that you would attempt to put your brother and Amber in such an uncomfortable position. Publicly." The restaurant manager, sensing the tension, approached Richard. "Mr. Thompson, as you said, everything has been arranged. Please don't concern yourself with the bill." "Thank you, Jean-Marc," Richard replied, shaking the man's hand. "The evening has been perfect, as always." As the manager retreated, Richard turned his attention back to Madison and Derek. "We should continue this discussion privately, but I want to be clear. This celebration was our gift to all of you, not the other way around." Elizabeth rose and moved gracefully to stand beside her husband. "Perhaps what's most disappointing is that this entire scene was unnecessary. Madison, we've talked about this behavior before." The revelation hit me suddenly. Elizabeth had known exactly what Madison was doing. The conversation I'd overheard the day before, her extended handhold when greeting me tonight, she had been aware of the tensions brewing. "What behavior?" Madison asked defensively, though her usual confidence had disappeared. "Using money as a weapon," Richard stated bluntly. "Your mother and I have watched you do this for years, using your financial privilege to make others feel less than. It stops tonight." Several guests began discreetly gathering their belongings, sensing this had become a private family matter. Richard noticed and quickly shifted to host mode. "Please, everyone, enjoy your desserts and cognac. 40 years of marriage teaches you that family discussions sometimes happen at inconvenient moments." His charm eased the tension somewhat, and conversation gradually resumed around the table, though considerably more subdued than before. Madison remained standing, her face a mask of controlled emotion. "I was only trying to do something special," she insisted, though her voice had lost its earlier certainty. "By publicly humiliating your brother and sister-in-law?" Elizabeth asked softly. "That was your intention?" "Of course not," Derek interjected smoothly. "There's been a misunderstanding." Richard fixed his son-in-law with a steady gaze. "Derek, I've known you for 7 years now. In that time, I've never seen you challenge my daughter's behavior, only enable it." For perhaps the first time since I'd met him, Derek appeared genuinely uncomfortable. Ryan, who had remained surprisingly calm throughout, finally spoke. "Madison, we should have talked about this privately. If you had concerns about our ability to contribute, you could have come to us directly." "That would have required actual empathy," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Elizabeth surprised me by placing her hand on my shoulder. "Amber has a point, Madison. Empathy has never been your strong suit, but it's not too late to develop it." The string quartet, which had fallen silent during the confrontation, began playing again, providing a gentle soundtrack to the uncomfortable family moment. Madison finally sank back into her chair, her perfect posture abandoned. "I didn't mean to cause a scene," she said quietly, though whether this was genuine remorse or damage control was unclear. Richard returned to his seat but leaned forward to address us all. "When I started in this business, I had nothing. Did you know that, Madison? Your mother came from wealth, but I had exactly $17 to my name when I asked her to marry me." This was a story I'd heard before, but Madison looked surprised. "Mom never cared about my bank account," Richard continued. She saw something in me beyond dollar signs. That's the foundation we built this family on. Not money, not status, but character and genuine connection. Elizabeth nodded. I've watched you judge Amber since the day Ryan brought her home, Madison. You've measured her worth by her clothes, her career, her background, everything except who she actually is. That's not fair, Madison protested weakly. What's not fair, Ryan said firmly, is creating situations designed to make Amber feel like an outsider in this family. It stops now, Madison. I sat in stunned silence, watching as years of unspoken tension finally surfaced. The wealthy, polished Thompsons I had been so intimidated by were having the kind of raw, honest family confrontation I never expected to witness in such a public setting. Richard signaled to a server, who quickly brought him a fresh glass of scotch. After taking a contemplative sip, he addressed us again, his voice lower. Tomorrow morning, I'd like all of you to come to the house for brunch. We have more to discuss, but this isn't the place. He looked around at the remaining guests, who were politely pretending not to listen. Tonight is still a celebration of 40 wonderful years with the love of my life. He raised his glass to Elizabeth, who smiled at him with genuine affection. The moment provided a graceful transition back to the original purpose of the evening, and gradually, the atmosphere began to recover. Madison remained uncharacteristically quiet for the remainder of the evening. Derek attempted to engage various guests in conversation, but his usual smooth charm seemed forced. Ryan kept his hand firmly intertwined with mine, a silent show of solidarity. As the evening drew to a close, guests began departing with warm congratulations to Richard and Elizabeth. When it was our turn to say goodnight, Elizabeth pulled me into a tight embrace. We have always seen your value, Amber, she whispered, even when others didn't. Richard hugged me next. Thank you for loving my son for who he is, not what he has, he said, loud enough for Madison to hear. In the elevator descending from Lucille, Ryan, Madison, Derek, and I stood in uncomfortable silence. As we reached the lobby, Madison finally spoke. I'm sorry about tonight, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. It wasn't supposed to go that way. How was it supposed to go, Madison? Ryan asked, his arm protectively around my waist. She had no answer for that. The Uber ride home from Lucille was quiet, with Ryan and I both processing the evening's dramatic turn of events. The city lights of Boston blurred past the window as I rested my head on Ryan's shoulder, emotionally exhausted but somehow lighter than I'd felt in years. I can't believe your father already paid the bill, I finally said, breaking the silence. Ryan sighed. I can't believe Madison tried to pull that stunt. Actually, no, I can believe it. I just never thought she'd be so blatant about it. Your mom knew, I told him. She's been watching Madison's behavior toward me all along. Mom sees everything, Ryan agreed. She's just more subtle about addressing it than Dad is. He squeezed my hand. I'm sorry I didn't always see what was happening. I should have stood up to Madison more. We both should have been more direct instead of trying to keep the peace, I admitted. When we arrived home, the contrast between our comfortable but modest brownstone and the opulence of Lucille struck me anew. Our home wasn't showcased in design magazines like Madison and Derek's, but it was warm, personal, and, most importantly, within our means. Ryan opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving for a special occasion, and we stayed up late into the night talking more honestly than we had in months about family dynamics, money, and our own values. I love my family, Ryan said, but tonight made me realize how much I've internalized their expectations without questioning them. Your parents seem to have a healthier perspective than I gave them credit for, I replied. Especially your mom. When morning came, we prepared for the brunch at Richard and Elizabeth's with a mixture of trepidation and hope. The evening's confrontation had cleared the air, but family wounds, especially those involving money and status, rarely heal overnight. Richard and Elizabeth lived in a stately Beacon Hill townhouse that had been in Elizabeth's family for generations. As Ryan and I climbed the steps to their front door, I noticed Madison and Derek's car already parked outside. Elizabeth greeted us warmly, ushering us into the formal dining room where a spread of pastries, fruits, and coffee awaited. Madison and Derek were already seated, both looking unusually subdued. Richard stood at the head of the table, reading the Sunday paper with his reading glasses perched low on his nose. "Amber, Ryan, good morning," he said, folding his paper and removing his glasses. "Help yourselves to coffee. Maria made her famous cinnamon rolls this morning." The initial conversation remained safely neutral. Comments about the beautiful weather, compliments on the food, gentle reminiscences about the anniversary celebration. Only after we had all filled our plates did Richard clear his throat and shift the discussion to the previous night's events. "I want to address what happened last night," he began. "Madison, your mother, and I have given this a lot of thought." Madison straightened in her chair, her expression guarded. "Dad, I've already apologized." "To whom?" Elizabeth interjected gently. "I don't recall hearing you apologize to Amber and Ryan." Madison glanced at me briefly before looking down at her plate. "I'm sorry for putting you both in an uncomfortable position." "It wasn't my intention." "Wasn't it?" Richard asked, his tone not unkind but definitely firm. "Madison, we've watched you create these situations for years. The forgotten wallet when you're out with Amber, the constant comments about their home and lifestyle choices, the pressure to participate in expenses you know are beyond their current means." Derek shifted uncomfortably beside his wife. "Richard, I think." "Derek," Elizabeth interrupted smoothly, "perhaps this is a moment to listen rather than defend." Madison's face had flushed red. "You make it sound like I've been deliberately cruel. I've only ever tried to include Amber in the family activities." "On your terms," Ryan pointed out. "Without considering our circumstances or preferences." "What's the point of having money if you're afraid to spend it?" Madison countered. "You work for the family business, Ryan. You could easily be making 3 times what you do now if you'd take on more responsibility." "That's exactly the issue," Richard said, leaning forward. "You measure everything and everyone by monetary value. That was never the foundation of this family." Elizabeth reached for her husband's hand. "Madison, after you were born, your father and I made a conscious decision to provide you with every advantage. Perhaps we went too far." "Too far?" Madison looked genuinely confused. "We never taught you the value of earning something yourself," Richard explained. "Or that a person's worth isn't determined by their bank account." I had remained silent throughout this exchange, feeling like an observer to a long overdue family reckoning. When Elizabeth turned to me, I was surprised. "Amber, would you walk with me in the garden? I think father and children need a moment together." The Thompsons' garden was a small oasis in the city, with carefully tended roses and a stone path winding between raised beds of herbs and flowers. As we strolled along the path, Elizabeth linked her arm through mine. "I need to tell you something about myself that few people know," she said. "My family name might be Old Boston Money, but by the time I was born, there was very little actual money left. The townhouse and some family jewelry were all that remained of the fortune." I looked at her in surprise. "But I thought—" "Most people do," she smiled. "My parents maintained appearances at all costs. I grew up watching them struggle to keep up with friends who had actual wealth while we ate simple meals in the kitchen after hosting lavish dinner parties in the dining room." "That must have been difficult," I said, understanding dawning. "When I met Richard, he was working as a line cook and taking business classes at night. My parents were horrified. They'd hoped I'd marry someone who could restore the family fortune. But Richard had something more valuable than money. He had vision and integrity." She paused beside a particularly beautiful rose bush, gently touching one of the blooms. "I recognized in you the same qualities I saw in Richard all those years ago. You love Ryan for himself, not his family name or potential inheritance. Madison has never understood that kind of love." "I've tried so hard to fit in with your family," I admitted. "Perhaps too hard," Elizabeth suggested kindly. We never wanted you to become someone else to belong here. When we returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. Madison's perfect posture had softened, and there were traces of tears on her cheeks. Richard was speaking in the gentle but firm tone I'd heard him use when mentoring young chefs in his restaurants. Starting tomorrow, Madison will be taking a more active role in our community outreach programs, he informed us as we sat down. Specifically, working directly with our scholarship recipients and Restaurant Worker Assistance Fund. Madison nodded, her usual confidence subdued. Dad thinks it will give me perspective. And Derek will be joining our financial planning committee for employees, Richard continued. Helping staff at all levels learn about budgeting, investing, and planning for their futures. Elizabeth squeezed my hand under the table as Ryan raised his eyebrows at these developments. As for you two, Richard turned to us, I want to be clear about something. The choices you've made, living within your means, building your careers gradually, prioritizing experiences over possessions, these aren't failures. They're values, Elizabeth, and I respect deeply. Your father started with one small diner, Elizabeth reminded everyone. He could have borrowed money from my family connections to expand faster, but he insisted on growing only as his genuine success allowed. The restaurant empire was built on hundreds of small, responsible decisions, Richard said. Not on flashy displays or overextension. As brunch concluded, Madison approached me while Ryan was deep in conversation with his father. I owe you a real apology, she said quietly. Not just for last night, but for a lot of things over the years. Madison, I began, but she shook her head. Please let me finish. I've never had to work for anything the way you and Ryan have. Everything's always been handed to me, and I've judged you for not having the same when the truth is, I've never earned any of it myself. Her vulnerability surprised me. We all have different journeys. Mine needs to change, she admitted. I don't expect us to suddenly become best friends, but I'd like a chance to start over. To get to know you as my brother's wife, not as someone I need to compete with or judge. It wasn't a complete transformation. Years of behavior patterns don't change overnight, but it was a beginning. Over the following weeks, subtle shifts occurred in the Thompson family dynamic. Madison began her community work, initially with reluctance, but gradually with increasing engagement. She texted me occasionally with genuine questions about marketing strategies for the scholarship program. Our conversations, while still sometimes awkward, became more authentic. Ryan and I hosted a dinner at our home a month after the anniversary incident, a simple meal prepared together in our modest kitchen. To my surprise, everyone came, including Madison and Derek. No one commented on our cute little place or suggested renovations we should consider. As we sat around our dining table, which had been my grandmother's and still bore the scratches and water rings of generations of family meals, Richard raised his glass in a toast. To homes filled with love rather than possessions, and to family bonds stronger than bank accounts. Elizabeth smiled at me across the table, a look of genuine approval and affection that meant more than any designer handbag or exclusive restaurant reservation ever could. The $180,000 bill that had nearly broken me became, ironically, the catalyst for finding my true place in the Thompson family. Not as the poor relation struggling to keep up, but as a valued member bringing different strengths and perspectives to the table. That night, after everyone had left and Ryan and I were cleaning up together, he pulled me into a dance in our small kitchen, spinning me between the refrigerator and island. You know what I realized tonight? He asked, his forehead resting against mine. What's that? We're the richest people I know. And in all the ways that truly mattered, we were. What's the most valuable lesson you've learned about family and acceptance? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics. Have you ever felt like an outsider in your partner's family? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, true wealth isn't measured by your bank account, but by the authenticity of your relationships.